Hello, how's it going, everyone? I hope everyone's doing okay during this pandemic right now. Today, we're gonna look at some Legacy content. We're gonna review a match of Legacy and Ad-Nauseum Tendrils. My goal with this video is gonna be to show you through some of my thought process and all the factors that go into or account to my decisions throughout the match. I'm gonna go over a match that I played on Legacy Double Dash. Now, since we're in this COVID pandemic, if you've been wanting to watch some Legacy content, definitely check out twitch.tv/JulesCubed. Every Thursday, we have this event called Legacy Double Dash. It's a tag team event. It's really cool. There's 16 teams of two, and each team has an archetype. So I'm on the Ant team. I'm teaming with Cyrus. This is an open deckless event before Ikoria, so there's no companions. Companion free. The open deck lists also play out differently. There's a lot of new things to consider, especially post board, and that'll play into some of the decisions and points I make later. So this is a match I play against Jarvis Yu on Snowco. We're the first match in this bracket right up here. So we're first round of seedings. This is definitely not the ideal bracket. I would much rather be over here on this side. There's a lot of better matchups for Storm here than here, but it's not random. There were seeding rounds and stuff, and this is where we ended up. So I guess step one should be looking at the lists. So first, I'm going to pull up Jarvis's list. Jarvis is playing Snowco, which is this Arkham Astrolabe Greed pile. We have Abrupt Decay, Swords to Plowshares in our blue deck. Beautiful. From a Storm perspective, this is actually this is not too hostile of a list. There is one Veil of Summer in the 75, and it's in the sideboard. As far as the main deck goes, there's one Leovold, one Narset, 6 Force effects, and the rest is a lot of air and cantripping for the most part. As usual, there's some dead cards. There's 4 Swords to Plowshares, 2 Dead of Winter, which aren't really dead, but are kind of dead against 59 of my cards. Other than that, pretty Xeroxy. 2/7 Library is worth making a note of, too. He has a very strong sideboard to make up for it, though. Here we go. We've got... Okay, we have it all on screen. I think you can see it, yeah. We've got Aethersworn Mage, Aethersworn Canis, Meddling Mage, Leovold, Damping Sphere. 4 cards I normally can't win through, at least the first 3. Canonist, Meddling Mage, D-Sphere. Normally going to need an answer to that to be able to go off. A third Leovold / Narset effect. 4 pieces of Graveyard Hate, Spell Bomb, Surgical. 1 singular Veil of Summer. 2 Plague Engineer to upgrade these Dead of Winter's post board. Once again, since open deck lists, some really important things to know from my side as we go into the match is that there are no Veil of Summer's main deck. It's important to know there's 6 Force effects. However, there's no the land Mystic Sanctuary. There's no Mystic Sanctuary in Jarvis's 75 here. So if I take a Force of Will, it's going to be gone. A lot of times, if just the threat of Mystic Sanctuary can influence your timing on discard, you might want to slow down or speed up based on if you want to play around Veil of Summer or if you want to play around Mystic Sanctuary. Because if you just duress and pass, they might just fetch a Sanctuary, put their Force back on top, and you're kind of back where you were a turn ago. You kind of got time walked. So on to my list. This is what I'm playing. It's relatively stock. Storm is almost never not stock. Notable things here, I have 8 discard, 15 land, 12 cantrips, normal 16 rituals. I do have 1 Past in Flames, 1 Dark Petition, 1 Empty the Warrens. I guess those are kind of the flex slots as far as the main deck goes. Main deck empty is important. Sideboard, this is also pretty stock. Most of this won't come into play. As far as this matchup goes, I have a Tendrils, a Carpet of Flowers, 2 Veil of Summers, and an Abrupt Decay. So let's get into game 1. My kind of plan for this is I'm going to let them talk, and I'm going to pause and talk through some of my decision points or just mute them as we go along.
Here is Cliffy versus Jarvis. 4-color Snowco versus Ant for match 1. Alright, our players are good to go.
So right off the bat,
So
Opening hands here. I'm gonna let Sukenik makes a good point. I'm gonna let him talk about it for a
kept
second.
seven. I know Cliffy likes these hands that involve Lion's Eye Diamond. I know Luris isn't around right now, but they're still just very important to how the deck works. How do you feel about Jarvis's hand?
Uh, Interesting to keep a hand with no interaction against a turn one or potential turn one. The plow looks incredibly weak, so I feel like Jarvis is already on a Multi 6.
So for my side, I've a pretty volatile hand here. I have cantrip discard double LED pedal cabal ritual land, which definitely a keep. Given that I know the matchup, I'm able to keep a wider range of hands because if I know I'm not getting Chalice, if I know I'm not getting Grizzlebranded, if I know I'm not getting Blood Moon, if I know my opponent isn't playing a Delveron one, I can definitely leverage that into my keeper mold decision a lot more. And Jarvis knows that, so he's definitely keeping a wider range of hands, knowing that I'm keeping a wider range of hands, especially these slow cantrippy hands right here. I think a lot of people will over respect the turn one capability of a deck like Storm. I think this is a really good keep from Jarvis. Um, Tim does say this is a dead plow right here. I mean, he has a brainstorm. Uh, Jarvis does play this game really, really slowly, which we'll see as this develops. My hand, I preordain, I double bottom, I hit this land here. I think I hit something here. Um, Anyways, my point about the double LEDs. This is definitely a hand that I'm keeping. Although this is I would prefer not to have this explosiveness in this matchup because I most of the time am trying to grind, especially in a game one when I know there's no Veil of Summer, no permanent base state, and things like Pass and Flames are always going to be safe.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, right? So since Cliffy was on the play, Cliffy got to choose whether or not like Jarvis already knew that Cliffy was keeping seven, but given that your opponent kept seven, there's a lot of hands that since they're on the play, they know they can just keep cantrips, which means that you're allowed to keep more hands that have cantrips, and that kind of insulates you. Like,
So Jarvis ends up keeping this ponder right here of Astrolabe, Sylvan Library, Uro. He's really planning on a late game, knowing that I'm probably most of the time planning on a late game myself here. And Sylvan Library is a very powerful card if we go into this attrition battle where I'm firing off discard spells. You're going to see that I start to slow play these cantrips or these discard spells a lot in these matchups because there's so much churning that these snow decks can do.
the whole I don't want to mulligan against the Thoughtseize deck sort of thing. Because it's kind of interesting. If Cliffy just kept a hand that was a little bit slower and has two discard spells, and you mulligan to 5 looking for a force effect, that's just like not a profitable exchange, and you're probably going to lose in the long run because you still need a quantity of cards to piece together something, especially with Era nowadays.
So here I end up holding the discard spell for the reasons I said before. I really don't want to fire it off until Jarvis gets time to spend his cantrips. I also know from open deck list there's no 2 mana permanent that I care about. There are 2 3 mana permanents that I care about, which will put a lot of tension on me on turn 3 to fire off this discard spell. Remember, there's 1 Leovold, 1 Narset. Things will develop on my turn. I have a pretty interesting draw step afterwards.
Thing. So he played Ponder and Brainstorm, and then now found the stuff, and he saw the quantity of cards such that the Force of Will doesn't just set him back really far by losing 2 cards.
Oh, another important part, just like a production thing, I have. So I'm not certain if they're showing just my hand up here or if they're showing my board state and Jarvis's hand up here. So I definitely like frame some things in different ways. You'll see them cut over to my screen sometimes. I pull out a notepad to sometimes try and explain some stuff because these commentators might not see all of the lines or be in the same on the same thought process of what my actual goal is here. So
I don't know.
I got a ponder off the top. My ponder sees duress. Thoughtseize empty the warrens here. We're going to get to see 2 of them. One of them I click to the bottom. I think it's a Thoughtseize. Yeah, it's a Thoughtseize. So I end up seeing this empty the warrens. And as of now, I know none of the cards in Jarvis's hand. But considering he just brainstormed, I assumed a card like Uro would more likely than not be one that Jarvis would put back, because this is not really something that shines in this matchup. So now we have the question. I have an empty the warrens on top of my library. How much mana will I have next turn? I'll have 1, 2, 3 lands. Lotus Petal 4, Cabal Ritual 5. I'm not going to be able to hit Threshold because I only have 3 in the bin. Petal will be 4, Thoughtseize will be 5, Duress would be 6. So I will have 5 mana total next turn. So I definitely want to fire off one of these discard spells here, since my plan is to go this turn. And I elect to lead with the Duress because there's only one card that I would want to have cast the Thoughtseize instead, which would be the one Leovold. And there is actually a chance that post-Duress, this Thoughtseize could actually whiff, say, the next turn. We look, my opponent has 3 creatures in hand. If I Duress this force right here and say Jarvis plays the library, there would actually be no targets for this Duress.
Then he should be able to do...
And if I do see the Leovold, I can just fire off the Thoughtseize and empty for 10. Was definitely not expecting to see a triple Leovold, or a double Uro hand
4,
here.
5, 6, 7. Okay, so the Cabal Ritual wouldn't have Threshold next turn, and
Oh, hello.
he can't, like...
That will not do.
Oh, wait, no. I'm silly. The Lion's Eye Diamond isn't needed to make the red mana because you have Lotus Petal. So Cabal Ritual just making the...
So one of the strengths as well as this Empty the Warrens plane right here is it gives me the ability to split push because I have these 2 Lion's Eye Diamonds. After I empty for 12, if this empty ends up not being strong enough, which now that I see this Uro, I'm starting to think that it might not actually be good enough here. Because Uro gains a lot, it gains 3 life a turn if you're able to cast and attack and do this cycling swapping thing that sometimes we'll end up seeing Jarvis do later. It can gain a lot of life and draw a lot of cards. So I end up taking the library here because I thought well, first off, Jarvis would need to draw exactly a force to punish me here. And when I have Empty the Warren, something that doesn't necessarily care about storm count to the same degree, I was really worried about Sylvan Library finding an answer in case this Uro wouldn't be enough. I do know that there are 2 Dead of Winters in Jarvis's list. And the other point that I was making earlier is about split pushing. Once I empty for 12, I'm able to still have 2 Lion's Eye Diamonds in play, and any tutor off the top still represents lethal. Any cantrip into a tutor, any cantrip can find a tutor and still represent lethal. So here I end up leading with the Thoughtseize instead of the Cabal Ritual because I really don't want to give Jarvis the opportunity to force my Cabal Ritual. Sometimes it's nice to do that as a bait, but here, even though it's a scenario where the Cabal Ritual is off screen, by the way, even though most of the time Cabal Ritual would not be a good card to force from Jarvis's side, like from his view, I don't want to give him the option since it would be the correct play here. Another thing about Empty that maybe I underestimated about in this matchup is the fact that it beats Veil of Summer, which sometimes can be an issue, although I know there are no Veil of Summer, so maybe I just naturally valued it higher in this matchup. But I think it's pretty hard to shuffle that Ponder when you're looking at a hand of discard plus 5 mana at the moment on turn 3 when I saw the Ponder. Yeah.
So if you're Jarvis here, how do you think you might want to sequence this one?
Before the Astrolab, I was thinking that I was just gonna bring back the Uro because I wanted blocker on board, I wanted life, I wanted cards. And
Yeah, and we're probably still gonna see that.
So Jarvis is going to go to 25 here, and I have 12 power in play. So right off the bat, that's a 3-turn clock. This Uro is a 6/6 on its own, and that's a 3-turn clock as well. So I barely have the upper foot just against this Uro alone. Not to mention, each attack is going to eat a goblin if I just alpha swing out. Oh no, we have an ad. While we have an ad, why don't I talk about the bracket? So I was mentioning earlier, I definitely didn't end up on the right side of the bracket here. So here we go. Are you guys able to see this? I think you guys are able to see it. The bottom two down here are D&T and goblins that can't be on screen. So we got 16 decks. Each one has a team of 2. Snowco, Ant, Reanimator, Delver, Grixis Delver, Eldrazi, Tess, and Sneak and Show. My path to the star here probably involves, let's see, Delver would win, so I'd have to play against Delver here. Eldrazi probably beats Delver. Eldrazi probably beats whichever one of those. So probably involve Eldrazi there. It should be pretty rough. Would much rather be on the sides of Togak lands. That's 4 great matchups right here. And 2.5 great matchups over here. Anyways, we're back to the match.
Because if the Oko lands, you're not going to really send your guys at Oko. Well, that's
Okay.
the same as
I'm going to skip back from what we missed from the ad.
it a little.
I alpha swing, draw the Thoughtseize that I knew was on top. Definitely would prefer just a fresh draw, but I committed to that as well when I kept the empty line. Which does end up taking the Yoko, which means my empty does actually have some chance of getting through here.
Uro coming out and gaining 3. Well, that's the same as Oko, gaining 3 with the food, so I suspect it would be Oko that's taken.
So there is really only one other decision point that I have this match. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to that here.
Goblins are just dead. Probably not.
Jarvis leads on a Coatl, finds the Ponder. Ponders into Astrolabe, Narset, Sylvan Library. So this is where I think Jarvis makes a really good play here and decides to keep the Narset. Now, he probably realizes here that he is able to stabilize against the Goblins because at one point I'm going to have to start leaving some back to block this Uro. And elects to keep the Narset. Now, what this does is, I was mentioning earlier that the empty line is kind of a split push, and why the empty line is really strong is because it forces your opponent to find an answer to the empty. And say you have 12 goblins out, and they ponder and see 3 forces. They have to shuffle to find an answer to the empty. So you gain a lot of equity through their they have to redirect their lines of action. And Jarvis has realized he's answered the empty the Warrens line, or is pretty close to answering it, and he's planning on answering my other line of, how do I get out of this? I top deck a tutor, or I cantrip into a tutor. So this is a great spot to keep the Narset. Although it could look like you kind of just want to shuffle to hit a Force of Will, or an answer to these goblins.
The Sylvan earlier, and with all the fetch lands, I can see that being valuable. But I think this is a shuffle in my book.
It's a little too late for the Sylvan now that we have this empty out.
Set up a situation where he's able to load the graveyard enough such that he can be like, all right, I'll attack with this Uro, then get this other Uro back from the graveyard the next turn. He needs to be gaining 6 on the cycles before, and like find an Oko. He needs a lot to go in his direction.
Jarvis went for the Narset.
Jarvis also soon is going to be able to loop Uros, where he'll attack with one, and then play another, Legend Rule it, escape it, so you pseudo-vigilance it as well, and get, I don't know, 3 triggers out in that single turn, which pretty much races the empty itself.
So that way it's like attacking with one of them and then be able to block with the other. Narset, and so getting the Narset down this turn is important.
So Jarvis runs out the Narset, minuses.
Jarvis really looking for with this Narset is fuel and Oko. So this is, he wish he could
Once again, we have the option to take this force or keep getting his Xerox on. And Jarvis actually, because he has these 2 lands in hand and knows he doesn't want to pitch this, or well, he has one in the bin. No, he has an Oko in the bin. Decides not to take this force negation and to take the Brainstorm, which once again is playing to not just answering my 1 empty, finding an answer for that, but setting himself up for after he answers empty to be in a great position.
Finding an Oko to just effectively mitigate 3 of the goblins would be huge. So I picture a world
Ends up finding a
where
force anyways.
It requires a lot of mana.
And this plow, which ends up kind of ruining my decision next turn here.
Another Uro to replace them, and then have Oko making a food.
All right, so here I have a question of there's an R set on 3. How many goblins am I
Yeah.
supposed
So his
to
draw step's not quite as good, and
how many
Cliffy's actually
goblins am I supposed to throw towards this Narset, and how many are supposed to am I supposed to throw at Jarvis's face? Now, as of the info that I know right now, I can theoretically win this race with goblins, like perfectly. I end up pulling up a notepad and mathing it out, and I can win the goblins if I throw them all at Jarvis. However, I think it's not going to be possible for Jarvis to. In order for that to work, Jarvis would need to draw a blank, have blanks in hand, and then whiff on a Narset minus. And there will still be a Narset in play at 1, and I don't think I can win that game unless all of that happens. So I decide that this Empty the Warrens isn't going to get the job done on its own. I kind of commit to answering this Narset. So I end up throwing 3 at the Narset because it guarantees that at least 1 damage will go through, which means if Jarvis downticks, my cantrips will be live outs. And what's my other point? If he doesn't have the plow, it will tick down to 1, which won't leave my cantrips as live outs, but it'll cancel and anticipate. Or possibly he just takes all 3 and throws a Quaddle in front of a Goblin.
valuing that here. What was his draw step for the turn?
Considering, oh, my hand's lagging up here. I think I drew a Dark Ritual or something irrelevant. Considering Jarvis kept that Ponder with a Narset, he's probably into protecting it here.
Just prevents them from drawing a card. Okay, Dark
It
Ritual.
looks like he drew a draw. Oh, there it is. Okay.
So I end up throwing 3 at the Narset.
The math for us. Very nice. Very.
Oh yeah, I was saying earlier I wasn't sure which screen they could see, if they could see my screen or not. So you end up seeing a little bit of notepad stuff that he like splices in, that Tim splices in.
Swinging with him.
Kind of.
Oh yeah, by the
He
way,
doesn't think he has.
2 commentators are Jonathan Sukenik, aka WatchWolf92, and Tim Schultz, the creator of Legacy Double Dash, aka Schultz Cubed on Moto. So I end up going for that attack. Narset lives at 2. Jarvis downticks.
So the Swords to Plowshares.
Cantrips a little bit past the turn with double forcible blue card in hand.
So
Loops an Uro, and I'm pretty done here at this point.
9 life next turn. Is
I'm
willing.
going to kind of fast forward through Jarvis's Xeroxy turn here. While I do that, I'm going to pull up these lists again. Oh no. There we go. Jarvis gets in with the Euro.
Oh, and that should lock it up.
It does lock it up.
Yeah, so it's becoming a lot more difficult, but one thing that Cliffy can do is he can.
No, I can't. I will just die,
It's not
as a
better
matter of
if your
fact.
plan is to attack with 1 Euro.
So Jarvis
escape
casts
the other one
his Euro,
every turn,
sacrifices
so
it
that way
to its
ships life
to the
every-
legendary rule, then escapes
So
it
like
so
if
it
you swords one
stays.
of your arrows, then that's like you lose that line of play.
Goes up to 15, has double force, double blue card, abrupt decay open,
Instantaneous life gain, then it will.
and I elect to move on to sideboarding at this point. So while this video loads, I'm going to open up Jarvis's list once again, as well
Being
as
able to
how I
escape the
think
other one on Legend
he
will
might
not
have
untap
boarded.
that easily. But when your arrows are helping you escape, it's a lot easier. Like you're drawing 3 cards a turn.
Sorry, we're having some difficulty here. There we go. Oh, it appeared on the... Okay. Anyways. This is how... This is right here. This is how I think Jarvis is going to sideboard from my point of view. So, we said earlier, Jarvis has a really large sideboard for this matchup. And part of that is because this deck always has a lot of dead cards as well in this matchup. Most notably, 4 Swords to Plowshares, 2 Abrupt Decays. I figured that there are probably 11 cards Jarvis wants to bring in, but possibly 9. The Canonist, Meddling Mage, Damping Sphere and the Leovold are definite ins. Plague Engineers are just upgrades from Dead of Winter. I don't think you want more than 2 of this effect. It's a little rough, especially if I even elect to board out my empty. And if I see one, I can just also elect to play around it by just choosing not to empty if I haven't simply drawn the empty itself. We also have 2 Spellbomb. The Veil of Summer is, of course, coming in. And 2 Surgical Extraction. Now, from my point of view here, Jarvis has a lot of permanent base state, but there's no it's called Deafening Silence. That's the other piece of permanent base hate this deck normally plays, which I guess is kind of nice that they have 2 mana hate instead of 1 mana hate, because I can fire a discard spell on 2 mana hate. However, there is no discard in Jarvis's sideboard, which means, from my point of view, let's open up my sideboard now. There we go. So, from my point of view, I'm planning on boarding in 5 cards, 2 Abrupt Decay, a Tendrils of Agony, and 2 Veil of Summer. The Abrupt Decays are to answer the permanents we saw before. 2 Veil of Summer are just ways to answer an overload of counterspells. I do have this knowledge advantage with Veil of Summer here that I know I don't need to hold it up on Jarvis's turn because Jarvis has no discard in his 75, which could play into some decisions. If it's like turn 2 and I'm not sure if I want to cast this Preordain or hold up Veil of Summer off my trop, I can just go ahead and fire off the Preordain and pick up some equity that way as well. The extra Tendrils of Agony is nice for multiple reasons. If you're being attacked on multiple axes, such as on the graveyard and empty the warrens, and say even if your Infernal Tutors get surgical, it's nice to have more business spells that aren't named Infernal Tutor. It's nice if you draw both, or if you happen to draw empty plus tendril. Sometimes that can get the job done. If you ever need to empty or tendrils to survive, you do have a backup plan, which is also nice with the secondary tendrils and might play into effect here later. I didn't elect to board in the Carpet of Flowers. Normally I do, because I saw that there are 2 Leovolds, and this card is very, very, very bad against the Leovold. You almost just have to hold it in your hand rather than play it proactively. So it would kind of be like a crappy green Dark Ritual in this matchup. I board out a Dark Petition. It's weak to Graveyard Hate. A Lotus Petal, because we're slowing down. Same with the Cabal Ritual, for both of those reasons combined. And 2 Preordain, because we have 3 Narset or Leovold effects in Jarvis's 75 post board.
Into the week.
So then an interesting thing happens that I get to see looking back now, is that Jarvis' board is actually kind of different from how I guessed. Now this part makes a lot of sense. He didn't cut the Coatls, he cut the Uros, and Uro's just like a big, it's like a larger Coatl, and I guess you probably just want the cantrip Coatl over the Turbo Coatl. He also elects to keep in Abrupt Decays. I wasn't so certain on that. I asked him afterwards, and funny enough, he said it was for the 1 Carpet of Flowers on my 75. So I got kind of that Xanad Swarm equity from it, where, if you ever see a Stoneblade player leaving Swords to Plowshares because they're afraid of Xanad Swarm when you don't board it in, something like that, which is pretty nice when I duress and saw the Abrupt Decays. And he also elected not to bring in Surgical Extraction, so he could keep the decays in, but also because he had no discard, as I mentioned before. I definitely do think Surgical should come in here. I think it's reasonable not to board in if you don't have discard, but I definitely think it's an upgrade to Abrupt Decay. And there is only 1 Veil of Summer.
So it's interesting to see Cliffy board out a Lotus Petal here, bringing in the decays. Instead of trying to go under, he's trying to combat Jarvis with the Veil of Summer. Jarvis already has the 4 Forcefulls.
Yeah, so one thing that kind of happens is when you have these linearly oriented decks, like sideboarding in Magic just makes the game so much more interesting because both players know the terms and conditions post board, so you know that they're gonna have less dead cards, no Swords to Plowshares, for instance. Therefore, they're gonna have more action cards.
There we go. We have a few too many open. That's probably why we're lagging. Okay, so this is my opening hand at... That is the wrong photo. Game 2 opener. So at the start of game 2, we look at... Here we go. Once again, we look at this Empty the Warrens hand. However, we have a Brainstorm. We're keeping pretty much any hand with Underground Sea, Misty, Brainstorm in this matchup, pre-board or post-board. We do have a Lotus Petal this time with our Empty the Warrens, which is nice. I'm definitely planning, because I'm on the play of this game, to fire off a discard spell turn 1 proactively because we saw so much permanent base hate in Jarvis' sideboard. And I do only have 2 Abrupt Decays, where discard spells are a resource I can use in different categories. I can't Abrupt Decay a Force of Will. And right here, right now, I can dress a Damping Sphere, where I can't do that on turn 3 per se. So this would be a really good time to turn this discard spell into an answer to a permanent base hate piece. And for that reason, before I continue, I guess I'll say Jarvis played this matchup the next week. Or not Jarvis, Cyrus played this matchup the next week. And same 75 against a different player. We decided on bringing in Massacre, which was really smart now that I think about it. It was a good idea he had. He doesn't have a Tendrils in his 75, but he does have a Massacre, and that gives you answers to Aethersworn Canonist and Meddling Mage, which it's nice to have just quantity more answers because they already have more permanents that you care about than you have answers. So I might consider trying that in the future.
So here we see Duress taking a Force of Will, which is, par for the course.
So as of right now, the hand that I know of for my opponent is these 4 cards. Trop, Misty, Astrolabe, Snap. Because I took a Force of Will. Here, let's pause here. I Duress took a Force of Will here. Jarvis played Astrolabe, drew Ponder, Force Negation. Now, fire off the turn 2 Brainstorm for the perfect Brainstorm here. Luckily, I find Infernal Tutor, so I'm like, thank God I can put this Empty the Warrens back. Jarvis' hand doesn't actually look that strong against an Empty, but I would much rather just have an Infernal Tutor because I could also Infernal 4 Empty if I choose to take that line later, and it's more Storm count. I don't know about this Force Negation or Ponder, but I do elect to keep both of the Thoughtseizes here because just in general, discard is so strong in this matchup.
Bottlenecks going on. So you have the payoff in the tutor, and you have the clearance, or however you want to put it, in the Thoughtseize.
I also elect to wait on this discard spell for the reasons I said before. Now, Jarvis saw 2 cards, and I got to look at the initial 7. I'm not too worried of a piece of permanent base 8 coming off the top. We do see a 3rd Force, which is a little annoying here.
Jarvis had the omniscience to know that the Force of Negation there would stick Cliffy with a pretty god-awful hand.
It's time to expect.
Well, then. Let's go back to this bracket here for a second. So, in order for me to get the Golden Star, to get the W, take on Snoko, Reanimator probably wins here, Delver probably wins here, Eldrazi probably wins here, Eldrazi probably beats whichever. So, would have to go against Eldrazi, which might be pretty rough. On this side, man, I don't know how some of these fair matchups end up playing as well. Alright, let's pause. I would imagine Hogak beats Elves. It's pretty close, however. This is probably because this Elves list has Reclaimers in the main deck and a Bog. I did lose to Elves in the prelims earlier. I believe Lands has the edge here. It's close. I believe this is an Earl Lands list. Maybe it would be Hogak. Whatever it is, it's probably a good matchup. This is the only one I don't want to see, and that one's going to die to Dredge really fast.
You play Gataxian Probe, because you would do things like that.
Bluffing after Gataxian Probe
So Jarvis ponders, finds a Coatl, elects just to keep that so he can have double force, double blue card up on my turn here.
Exist. In my
Yeah.
opinion, I never played Cataxian Probe. I was a lands player, so
Okay,
I had to
so
sit there,
I
look around
fetch to
at
shuffle,
6 lands and say, I got something.
and here we have a pretty interesting brainstorm. I'm going to go ahead and pause this because this is one of the most important brainstorms of this game. It's funny to say it like Jarvis actually thinks for a while about forcing it, which would be very strong considering I have these two Thoughtseizes in my hand up here. I don't think it's correct to force just in the blind. Let's see. It would be this one right here. Okay. So I'm going to talk through this with the info I have so we can see from my point of view. I have, from Jarvis's hand, I know of a Snapcaster Mage and a Trop. That's it. And he has 4 other cards. I imagine he wants at least 2 of them because he Ponder kept and... Okay, I imagine he has at least 1 desirable card because he Ponder kept once. So this is a really interesting brainstorm. And this brainstorm is kind of where we have to decide what our plan is this game, is right here. We have 3 cards in the bin. So first off our hand, we have 2 discard spells, 2 tutors, Cabal Ritual, Lotus Petal, and 2 lands, a fetch and a swamp. So now we got to go, what are our ways of winning? So empty the Warrens. If we choose to empty here, let's see if we can even do it this turn. How much mana will we have this turn? Well, we could play a land, a Lotus Petal, a Cabal Ritual. We can't, however, get Threshold because we'll have 3, 4, 5. Even if we go Thoughtseize, we'll only have 1 mana for Cabal Ritual at that point. So that's out of the books here. And I'm probably not going to want to empty the Warrens this game because this is the kind of hand where if I can empty the Warrens, I can probably Ad-Nauseum. And Ad-Nauseum will generally be stronger. But these Thoughtseizes could tell me otherwise. I could go for a Past in Flames line, which is very, very strong. And if I elect to go for the Past in Flames line, the best way to go about looking for a confirmed Past in Flames line next turn would be to keep both Infernal Tutors, a Cabal Ritual. Oh, hello. Here we go. Would be to keep both Infernal Tutors, a Cabal Ritual, and then play my land, Infernal Tutor, for a second Cabal Ritual. Then we'll actually be untapping with the ability to go Thoughtseize, Lotus Petal, Cabal, Infernal Tutor, Past in Flames loop. Will we be able to do all of that? We'll actually need to wait another turn because we have to put 2 cards back here. Yeah, we'd probably put the Lotus Petal back, fetch a Volk here, go about it that way, Thoughtseize once. And then we'd have to wait because we end up finding Jarvis has double force. We could end up putting a Thoughtseize back here. I just don't want to take that risk of running into Jarvis finding multiple forces because there are 6 in his deck, not to mention Veil of Summer. The other issue with this line here, it loses to, remember how I said turn 3 is when Jarvis has so many pieces of permanent base hate? Jarvis also finished a lot of cantripping. So although this Infernal Tutor for Cabal Ritual line is really, really good at setting up a kill next turn, we run into so many issues here. The fact that Jarvis could untap, play a Damping Sphere, play a Spellbomb, play a Hold Up Veil of Summer, play a Leovold, play any of those pieces of permanent base hate that I mentioned before. Jarvis could also Surgical our Infernal Tutors when we go for that line, which would be absolutely awful. So for all of those reasons, I definitely feel like rather than Infernaling for a Cabal Ritual, I want to fire off at least 1 Thoughtseize here. So if I fire off a Thoughtseize here, I'm probably planning to Ad-Nauseum next turn. Because if I fire off the Thoughtseize here, I have a Brainstorm. Oh, I keep clicking on it. I'll have Brainstorm, Thoughtseize in the bin. So that's 5 right there. Lotus Petal Fetch or Lotus Petal Thoughtseize or Fetch Thoughtseize. Any combination of that will get us Threshold for Cabal Ritual. So this is turn 3, by the way. So we do have a land drop left. So that means turn 4 we could possibly have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 mana. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 mana. So we could Ad-Nauseum with a mana floating. So the way I elect to stack this, because Ad-Nauseum is your best way to fight through hate, because you don't care about Plague Engineer, you don't care about Graveyard Hate, You don't really care about Veil of Summer to the same extent. You still get to draw 10 cards if you get Veiled, where that isn't true with getting Veiled with the Tendrils line. We could also try to set up an Infernal Tutor for Storm count and mana, like all in the same turn. Infernal for Cabal, right? Cast 1 Infernal again, and do some weird Tendrils nonsense there. But that's really, really slow and is susceptible to all the things I mentioned before. So I think Ad-Nauseum is the way to go given this. We do also know Jarvis has a Snapcaster Mage, so if Jarvis happens to find the Veil and he'll have Veil Snap Veil up, that would be pretty rough. So now the question is, knowing that I want to Ad-Nauseum, how do I stack this? So I want to keep both these Thoughtseizes. I want to keep the Cabal Ritual. I want to keep all the mana. The only thing I don't want is the second Infernal Tutor. So I'm putting an Infernal Tutor back. Now the question is, do I put the land back, or do I put the swamp back, or the delta back? And the thing is, if I put the polluted delta back, I'm going to Thoughtseize once. If I see a hand such as Force, like we'll see here, I'm definitely going to want to Thoughtseize again this same turn. Because if I Thoughtseize now, or if I Thoughtseize the next turn, this Thoughtseize has to take a Force before I go off. And I have even more incentive to cast it now, because Jarvis could untap hold of Veil of Summer. So if I Thoughtseize and see like Force Veil of Summer or Force Veil of Summer, I'm definitely going to want to fire both of them off. So for those reasons, I elect to put Infernal Tutor back and then Polluted Delta and play the Swamp and lead on a Thoughtseize. And if I see a hand such as 2 Force of Wills, I'll fire off double Thoughtseize. If I see Force of Will plus permanent base 8, I'll fire off double Thoughtseize. But if I see Force of Will, Ponder, Brainstorm, Astrolabe, I'll probably only fire one off, let Jarvis do some cantripping so that I don't just hit a random cantrip that could find a Force and let him still acquire it. So
I'm quickly putting back the two.
I think I actually take a while here on this decision. There's a lot to think about there. So now from Jarvis's side, we have Force, Coatl, Library, Snapcaster, Trop. Jarvis knows I only know about the Snapcaster Mage and the Tropical Island. I pull up a little notepad. I do some math to see if I can empty. Spoiler, I can't. Anyways. So I'm going to go through that. I'm going to end up firing off both Thoughtseizes. And since I fire both of them off, when game 1 I played them pretty slowly, that's going to kind of show off as a red flag to Jarvis, because Jarvis also knows that in a Xerox mirror, I guess it's kind of a Xerox mirror like this, you generally want to wait on your discard spells until it's time to go, or just Storm against blue. There's a lot of times you want to wait on your discard spells until it's time to go. So when I fire one off, play another land, fire another one off, take Force, and I don't take Sylvan Library, Snapcaster, Sylvan Library, Force, or something like that, Jarvis probably knows he's in trouble next turn.
You put back a fetch land.
Yeah, so that just means he plans on going for it next turn. Or, like, doing something over time.
And now you could say that it could be nice to put the fetch back and fetch anyways, but there are a lot of cards I could draw to not be able to go off, such as if I just cantrip and don't find mana, if I draw an Abrupt Decay, if I draw Veil of Summer, it's fine. If I draw another discard spell, I would much rather have the ability to be guaranteed able to go off next turn.
Yeah, that's... And we actually see him firing off the second one, just not even risking it. You know you gotta take this Force.
Also, Jarvis does have 6 Forces in his deck, but I've gone through 3 of them, and Jarvis has seen less than a quarter of his library. So it is pretty low chance that Abrupt Decay does not look strong here.
What this line allows for is that next turn, he's able to Cabal Ritual with Threshold. He has 6 cards in his graveyard right now. Lowest Petal is going to be 7. He can make the red mana there.
So Jarvis goes for the Snap Ponder here. Probably over the library because he knows he's dead. Sees Brainstorm, Tundra, Veil of Summer. But for the reasons I mentioned before, that Jarvis really thinks I'm going to go for something next turn, and I'm really kind of signaling that when I fire off both discard spells now. I mean, I could just be saying mana might be tight, but I'm probably saying I have to go for it. So Jarvis ends up shuffling, hits a Brainstorm, which is one of the cards in the 3, and kind of confuses these two for a bit, but ends up finding a Veil and shuffling it correctly, and misses on the Force, which is very lucky for me.
Threshold, so your Cabal Ritual is now a +3. So he has access to 8 total mana.
So here we go for the Ad-Nauseum. We're at 14 life. We've played a land, and we'll have a Lotus Petal up. Storm will be 4? 1, 2, 3. Storm will be 4, yeah. Storm will be 4 here.
We see him casting the Infernal Tutor. He should be able to just get Past in Flames, I believe, because then the Past in Flames can recast the Tutor. You can cast Thoughtseize for cheap or chain some tutors. I don't know. Something. Well, he has 3 mana floating, so if you Past in Flames...
Another important thing here is I can deduce that Jarvis does not have a Surgical Extraction, because Jarvis could have Surgical to take me off Threshold, and I feel definitely would have by now. When I lead on Cabal Ritual, even though I had 7 in my bin, Jarvis can still hit either Brainstorm or Thoughtseize to hit me down to 5, so this Petal can't save me back up. I could possibly fire off... No, I would only have 2 cards in my hand. Like, maybe if I sequence with the land, but he would still go for it. I don't think there's a reason not to go for it if Jarvis had Surgical. Little do I know he didn't even board it in.
Oh, he's going for Ad-Nauseum.
Maybe that's not good.
They think that I have a line, I'm a mana short.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So you were short rituals there, it seemed like with only Cabal Ritual and then needing to Infernal Tutor for Tendrils, it just wasn't enough. That was a lot of damage very quickly, but...
Okay, can I just say Ad-Nauseum sucks before we continue? Alright, this is no. I did board in a 4-drop, but I boarded out a 5-drop, so if anything, it helps the curve, you know? I boarded out a 2-drop for a 2-drop, 2 1-drops for 2 1-drops, and a 0 for a 2. So it's almost identical curve. I also don't think the curve actually matters that much in terms of Ad-Nauseum. I think that's like an overrated concept that like you want to like. I think Dark Petition is actually a good card for casting Ad-Nauseum, because if you have mana floating and you hit Dark Petition, you take 5 and you stop. You don't need to find an LED; they're just dead if you have enough mana floating. So this is our scenario right here. Now, I'm at 4 life. Jarvis has a 2-1 in play. I have just a Lotus Petal. There are 6 rituals still in my deck. There's 40 cards left. So the way this math works out, if I flip a 2-drop, I'm dead to the Snapcaster Mage, and there are 10 2-drops. There are 8 2-drops in my deck. But if one of them's Abrupt Decay, it's kind of a free roll, because it's not a free roll, but like I have outs to not die. I could flip another Lotus Petal or Brainstorm into 2, I guess, or something, and decay the Snapcaster to untap. Although that would definitely not be preferable. If I hit the Cabal Ritual, I could flip a Dark Ritual and then mini Tendrils for, I don't know, 12, 14, something like that. So there's a quarter of my deck that puts me down to 2 and commits me to keep flipping, but some of them don't commit me to go for lethal here. And because I have this Brainstorm in my hand, well, first off, I know Jarvis has these 3 cards down here. I don't know of this Brainstorm. But where are we at? Okay. But I can't really Ad-Nauseum go down to 4 and just stop it. Like, I don't have enough resources here with these 5 to expect to untap and win. I need a ritual, I need an Abrupt Decay, I need another cantrip, I need something else. Especially since I have this Brainstorm in my hand, like, just having one more card would be really, really nice. Like, if I didn't flip this Brainstorm, any card would be, like, hitting a land wouldn't matter. But if I can hit a land and take no damage, I think I would stop there. Like, if I could just hit once, hit a land, where if I didn't have this Brainstorm, hitting the land would be basically a blank. This Brainstorm really makes me want to keep hitting. And it really makes me think that if I hit down to 3 here and then stop, like, I'm not dead. Like, the only thing that Jarvis could have that has haste would be Oko elking the Astrolabe in play, but I'm already at 4, so I can't really stop that. So for those reasons, I elect to hit again in a little bit.
Ghost Lotus Pet
I think about it for a while. I also pull up a notepad and run some numbers.
and Cabal Ritual, yeah.
And then post sideboard, he doesn't have any more. No, the only 4-drop left in his deck is.
The only two I don't want to hit would be Infernal Tutor here, because then I'm committed to going this turn, and I would need to hit like Dark Grid LED exactly.
The problem is I feel like you just don't necessarily have the resources. So I feel like the math here kind of involves, like, how likely am I able to win if I keep on going with Ad-Nauseum versus being able to brainstorm.
It looks like he's doing some math.
Yeah, chat noticing that, you know, Ant isn't very good at casting Ad-Nauseum due to the, like, even though
The lack of 37-0 drops in my deck, yeah.
so you can see him here writing down just cards that cost more than the
Also, this is okay to do in paper, by the way, guys. Like, I think Storm players sometimes get away. Like, if you... I play Storm very, very fast in paper a lot of the time, and I think sometimes that lets me get away. I'm not saying it's good, but sometimes people are less inclined to call me on slow play if I only slow play. I don't even know if you would call it. It's like slow play is such a subjective term. I think it's okay if you are decent enough at math to do this fast, to go, how many 2-drops are in my deck? Okay, there's 10. That's 1 out of 4. And that's not that complicated math. And it's... I don't think I've ever taken longer to resolve an Ad Nauseam than a Doomsday. So that's kind of not a good argument. But my point being, it's okay to do the math, take a second, especially if it's like game 3 on your combo turn. It's okay to do the math, ensure that you make the right decision.
you know, in the worst way possible.
It's the best way.
And then, you know, you're not in the booth as often as I am. What you have to know is, if you call shot something like that, it just has to happen. So Cliffy actually understands.
So I flip a Ponder, which is great, and I just stop and pass the turn. Now Jarvis's turn here. Jarvis leads on this Brainstorm. I believe he ponders next. So this is a really good sign for me. He finds like absolute garbage, ponders to shuffle. Jarvis does have a land drop left because this is his turn 4, and this swamp can cast Brainstorm because of the Astrolabe. Finds a Plague Engineer. I have an Empty the Warrens in my hand. However, I do know Plague Engineer is in Jarvis's deck, so it's not a total blindside here. So Jarvis finds a Force of Will, but Jarvis knows I have the Veil of Summer, so this is not the strongest Force of Will when your opponent has a Veil of Summer in their revealed card zone. Abrupt K, the worst card here for many reasons. He puts it back and elects to float Plague Engineer on top, which is a pretty tricky thing here by Jarvis because he knows that I have an Empty the Warrens.
3 remaining force effects because there's the.
And this is kind of where leveling can play in because I could act knowing that he knows that I know, etc. So this is definitely a spot to lead on Brainstorm because I'm trying to do something this turn whenever, like in general with cantripping, I think turn 1 on the play, most of the time Preordain is the best one to lead off on, especially if you know you're looking for a land. I generally like to go in the order of Preordain, Ponder, Brainstorm, and if I'm trying to go off in this single turn, I reverse that order. Brainstorm is generally the best one to cast on your combo turn because you get to convert cards of excess types into other ones. For example, this Abrupt Decay. You guys know how Brainstorm works. And then Ponder I would call second just because it sees the most cards.
He would have died to Abrupt Decay. Or no, he would have went to 1, but, you know, that's close enough to die.
Okay, this is also a pretty hard spot.
Okay,
I'm going to go ahead and pause this.
Because he would have hit.
We are at Didn't open. There we are. Okay. So, Jarvis cast a Brainstorm, played a fetch land, passed the turn. Could be a perfect Brainstorm, could be floating. Now, I'm at 1 life. I need to do something this turn, and off of this Brainstorm, I didn't find any rituals. I'm probably not going to be able to Tendrils Jarvis for 18 this turn. I could try some crazy-ass stuff involving, like, Ponder Shuffle, then Ponder again, and hope to hit a Tutor and an LED, and then go Tutor, LED, Pass in Flames, Cross Fingers, all that. But I think it's better, just now that I have so many cards in hand, I have a very strong chance to win this game because look, I'm resolving a Brainstorm with 9 cards in hand as a Storm deck, and Jarvis has 4 cards, and I've gone through 3 Forces so far, and I have a Veil of Summer for the 4th one that's in Jarvis's hand that I don't know about. So my plan here is going to be to use one of these spells to live a turn, and then use the other one to clean up, I guess you would say. One of these needs to bridge me to the next turn. I also just have 2 cantrips. I have so much equity to win if I can just untap here next turn. So one of these needs to let me win. One of these needs to win me the game later. There is also second Tendrils in my deck, which is worth noting here. There's only 1 Pass in Flames. So I this turn have a land drop. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 mana here. So one of the lines I could take would be Veil/Duress, then play the LED, then play one of the Storm spells. So now do I want to empty or do I want 2 Tendrils? Well, if I really want to untap, let's figure out which one's safer. The Empty of the Warrens loses to a Plague Engineer. The Tendrils of Agony loses to a Veil. But Jarvis could have an answer to empty on top. Like, that's just a smart thing to do when you know I have empty, would be to float the answer. And if I don't empty, Jarvis does have the option to fetch it away if for some reason if he didn't want to keep it, but he probably won't because he knows I have this empty in hand. Now, in order for Jarvis to protect or to like block out me knowing of Plague Engineer, he does lose some value from not being able to shuffle away one of the, like this Tundra. He could have held the Plague Engineer, put the Tundra back, and then he would also get a fresh draw. So this isn't at no cost to Jarvis, the play that he's making here, by floating the Plague Engineer, but it's probably the right play, knowing I have this empty, to keep me guessing here. So I would like to Tendrils. Jarvis could have a Veil of Summer, though. And if I go for the Tendrils and he Veils, I lose. If I go for Empty the Warrens and he has Plague Engineer, I lose. So the way to get around this is if I keep the Tendrils and the Empty and the Duress, I can Duress. If Jarvis has a Veil, he's going to cast it there, because if not, I take it. Then go for Tendrils. And if I Duress and don't get Veiled, if I Duress and get Veiled, I have to go for Empty, because that's my out. And then I would lose to a Plague Engineer on top. But he wouldn't be floating. He would have to have it in hand, which would make more sense. If he had the Veil, he would probably just hold it in hand. So I can't beat Veil plus Plague Engineer, but I can beat one or the other if I play wisely. So the plan here is, since I have 5 mana, to Duress, check for Veil. If I don't see Veil, go for Tendrils. Just because I don't want to risk Plague Engineer on top, because I do have 2 cantrips and Abrupt Decay. Even if Jarvis drew the Meddling Mage or the I keep want to say Containment Priest, Aethersworn Canonist, or a Leovold or an Narset or whatever, I have an Abrupt Decay for it. And my Abrupt Decay won't get Veiled because I know they don't have Veil. I mean, I guess I could draw at them, but whatever. And I have 2 cantrips. I have a very high chance to win if I can just untap. So I elect to keep Tendrils, Empty, Land, the LED for Storm Count, the Duress. Let's just watch it from here now.
Oh wait, no, Magic Online draws them backwards, right? You have hit LED? I don't know. Screw it. So he needs to figure out what to do from here. So the LED is nice. So one thing
It's not the nicest right now.
you can actually use Ponder with LED to make mana with the LED, and then draw the card off of the Ponder. So
So once again, I don't know if they can see my screen or not. Let's pull that back up. Oh, that's the wrong one. Here we go. So there is another line here of if I really wanted to go for it this turn, I could put back, say, empty the Warrens, fail, empty duress, ponder shuffle, ponder hit again, try to hit a ritual. But it's really hard to get to 18. If Jarvis is at 16 or something, that would have more merit. But I just don't think it's the best play given the scenario.
Hmm.
You've got
I'm not
two,
I'm not
three,
sure.
4 storm for 8 life. Buys you a couple of turns.
Well, I guess another line is you can make some goblins. So when he says whether or not he should play around Veil, does that mean he has a kill? Well, let's see.
So I've gone through 3 forces. If Jarvis has a 4th one, I'm going to duress it here, except for when he has the 1 Veil. So I actually think Veil is the worst card in my hand. So I believe I put Veil of Summer back and then Ponder, untap, draw the Ponder here. It took me a while to come to that conclusion that I wouldn't actually need this Veil because Jarvis has 4 cards in hand, is going to get duress, and we'll have 4 forces in the bin.
What's his? Ponder shuffle for Dark Writ?
That's a line. It doesn't quite get there yet.
Well,
You have to
Cabal
like ponder,
gets more
shuffle
manus,
for
that might be
brainstorm for
better.
Rid or some nonsense.
I'm not sure.
This abrupt
He might just have to Hail Mary and like.
This abrupt decay is even more incentive for me to take the most cautious line, just because I have an answer to a piece of permanent base hate if Jarvis found one. Luckily, he never found one this entire match.
Up to 6. Even if you did your fun line of putting the tendrils back, pondering into it, using the LED for.
That is a line too, but I
Yeah,
can't
that's
quite
just,
hit
like,
Lethal
14
Storm.
damage, I think.
If I wanted to not play around Plague Engineer or Surgical Extraction, well, I guess I would know about a Surgical. But I wouldn't know at the time I'm casting the Duress is the issue, so then the empty would already be on top. I could Brainstorm the empty on top, then Duress, then Ponder, crack the LED, draw into the empty, and I could empty for a reasonable-ish storm count. I could even Ponder, whole priority, Abrupt Decay the LED, whole priority, crack LED for maximum storm count.
Or it could be empty.
Oh, because empty's only 1. Oh, he went for it. I like it.
Okay, so a baby.
So here we take the conservative route.
So only 8 drills or 4 drills.
I'm explaining a lot of this on my notepad too here. Because once again, I think they can see my screen. I'm not sure, so I drop it down
That's
if
why it's
not,
10 drills, right? Because if you have 10, that's 20 damage.
as you'll see right here.
Or floating engine.
I'll let Jarvis know what's
All
up.
the shots.
Yeah.
So he's not getting the cards, but he's playing the cards he's dealt well.
Yeah. Who knew Cliffy would make both a great player and commentator?
So now this next turn here, we're definitely going to because we know of a Ponder on top of our library. The game plan most of the time here is going to be to Ponder and either make a small empty or Ponder a rock like LED or Pedal and then empty. Something to apply enough pressure because I don't know there's a Plague Engineer. It's just what I chose to play around because I had the ability to. And that's a good general rule with a deck like Ant. If you have the ability to play around something, it's generally best to do so.
I like this. Astrolabe and Quaddle are
So this empty is going to help me split push, as I said before, because if Jarvis doesn't have this Plague Engineer, he really needs to find an answer to even an empty for 4 because he's at 9.
Plague Engineer in hand, especially the way Jarvis hit it on top, was trying to sweep the board, and so he's still playing towards that line.
Yeah, but the Veil of Summer off the top is kind of rough.
Yeah, so Jarvis labes into a Veil of Summer, which is pretty strong. And my Ponder here is also a pretty good Ponder. I find LED Infernal Tutor and then the Veil of Summer that I knew was on top. So the cards below were Infernal Tutor and LED. I believe it's LED below. It's some sort of mana. It's like mana, Infernal Tutor, Veil of Summer. and I still have this Abrupt Decay for insurance. So, if Jarvis does have the Veil like he does here, my plan
Yeah, it's kind of hard.
for next turn is to lead on my own Veil, and then actually go for a Pass in Flames line to play around the one Veil of Summer, if I choose to. Because I could run into Surgical, but if I run into Surgical with a Pass in Flames line, I have both a Tendrils of Agony and
still kind of
Empty the Warrens. Here, why don't I pause here? So, if Jarvis has a Veil of Summer, I get Infernal Tutor. I can go Ritual or LED, whatever the next card is. Infernal Tutor. Well, I would Ponder into it because I have a Veil on top. So I would go Veil, Ponder, Ritual, Tutor, Crack LED, Pass in Flames. And if there's a Surgical, I'm going to hear about it right there. And whatever it hits, I'm still able to do something. I'll have so much mana that he can't really afford to Surgical Cabal Ritual because then I just Tendrils for lethal. If they have Surgical and Veil, then I don't know, I'm probably got. And I have 4 Goblins out. If they run out the Plague Engineer here and they have the Veil, I have the ability to play around it by going for the Pass in Flames line, flashing back Abrupt Decay the Plague Engineer, then empty again, or just do it first off the bat. I'm not sure if the colors or the mana lines up that I can do it first, but I can definitely do it later. I have also only found 1 Ritual so far this game.
problem is Veil of Summer's going to stop the Abrupt Decay from being able to kill.
But I did board one out.
I think that's a really good line. So
And then here Jarvis draws a Spell Bomb, which eliminates any outs I have. First we see Plague Engineer come down to answer my current Goblin out that Jarvis is required to split push with. Oko is also an out to that, to be fair. He just Elk a Labe. So he had quite a few outs. Even Quaddle into Quaddle is an out. Now I'm down to 4. This Spell Bomb takes away my ability to play around the 1 Veil of Summer, which Jarvis ends up having. I can play around a Force Will here.
I was hoping he could trigger the Veil off of either the Decay or a...
Now, there is an interesting point that they made here that if I knew it was exactly Veil of Summer, I could Abrupt Decay. I didn't even think of this line until now, but I could Abrupt Decay the Plague Engineer, hoping Jarvis Veils. This is only if I know he has Veil, because if he doesn't if he doesn't Veil, I lose. I could Abrupt Decay the Plague Engineer, hoping Jarvis Veils. And Jarvis might actually Veil now that I think about it, because it's lethal on board. And then go... oh, no, that still doesn't work because the empty's out of my deck. And I still can't Tendrils because Veil would do both of those. So that doesn't work. So no, I'm just dead that way. I guess it would let me know that I'm dead.
I'm not really sure. I mean, the cards in your hand aren't particularly good, so I'm guessing it's Brainstorm, but I'm not really sure what the combination of cards is since you're checked in so many directions, like your graveyard,
Yes, you can
Plague Engineer.
makes a great point. That's
Yeah,
a great way to put it. I'm checked in all directions
Maybe
here.
it's, oh, okay. I think I get it. I think your plan is to get the second Tendrils and try and kill him with that. Right? I think there's 2 Tendrils in his deck.
I end up looping Tutor for second Tutor because if Jarvis just randomly has 1 Plow in his deck, for whatever reason, he could, if I only hit for 10, he could Plow the...
Understands.
Well, first he could Plow the Plague Engineer to live. Secondly, he could pop the Spell Bomb, draw a Force of Will. If he realizes that line too late, say with the Tendrils on the stack, he realizes he could pop it.
Close.
Then a Force would not save him.
And he got so far, but in the end, didn't even matter.
And I got Veiled, and mostly the Nil Spell Bomb packed it up. I guess any of those collectively all packed it up, but...
Mr. Magic, you guys came here to see.
Oh, hey, there's a hate piece.
Yeah. Very well executed on both sides. I did very much enjoy Jarvis trying to set up the double arrow thing game 1. And then this game just kind of a back and forward. Jarvis had all these Force of Will stripped out of his hand.
Jarvis did do a similar thing this game as he did last game, where he did a good job of checking all the possible angles that I could win. And that's really the best way from a control deck standpoint, other than permanent base 8. That's kind of like a cheesy way to win that works if you can commit 2 or 3 slots, which Luckily, I didn't run into. But I think the best way to combat Storm from this fair blue deck is to be able to attack on all angles, have an answer to empty the Warrens, have a graveyard hate. Counter Magic's like kind of the weakest one now, but that one still works. Pressure is also very effective because it will force me to find answers to your Force of Wills or Permanent Base 8 or what have you as well. Like, Pressure is very good in conjunction with any other form. Also weakens Ad-Nauseum, although that's not really a big deal in this matchup. I mean, it was in that game. But I did all that damage I think I did to myself. Anyways, that's going to wrap it up right there. It's been brought to you by Mana Tutors. Make sure to check out all the content there. We have a lot of great writers on the website. If you haven't checked it out, it's the logo right here on the side, manatutors.com. I have some articles up there. I plan to write a few more now that we're in some quarantine time. I have a little more time to write. Feel free to find me on socials. I'm Cliffy81 on Twitch, twitch.tv/Cliffy81. Make sure to check out Legacy Double Dash, twitch.tv/SchulzCubed. There'll be links below to both of those. Follow me on Twitter at Cliffy81, but the I is a 1, so CL1FFY81. Feel free to message me there for any questions. I also do coaching/tutoring, whatever you'd like to call it, and message me for details on that. All right, everyone take care.